My name's Jim Toomey. I draw a syndicated comic strip called Sherman's Lagoon.
The key word is passion. You gotta have passion, you know?
And say, Greg, you're not gonna believe this. They think they've got ivory bills in Florida.
I'm a native Floridian and I love the Florida Aquarium.
Welcome to Evening Tide Talks. I'm Debbie Stone with the Florida Aquarium, and it's my pleasure to be here with famous author Carl Hiaasen. Mr. Hiaasen, I have some questions for you. First and foremost, having been born and raised in Florida, how do you think the state has changed throughout your career here as a writer?
Oh my God, well, it's gotten stranger. It's gotten more bizarre, and when I was, the population has quintupled since I was born, so that it's changed a lot. It's an interesting place to be a writer and a journalist and a novelist, and it's also at times a challenging place.
Sure. And I'm sure that's impacted your writing, particularly your last few novels. How has that impacted your plots, your characters?
Well, I mean, I work out a lot of demons in the novels that my characters get away with things that I wish I could get away with in real life. So, when you grow up in a place and you see it changes drastically, and not for the better. A lot of the places I grew up are parking lots and expressways now. So my characters take a dim view of that, and I get to work out a little of those problems on page.
Right. Sure. Now, one of the unique characteristics of each one of your novels clearly are your colorful characters. Mm-hmm. Where does the inspiration for a character like Chemo, with a disfigured face and a weed whacker for an arm, come from?
Yeah, I don't have a direct connection with Chemo and any living person that I know, but in general, the whole South Beach scene is full of freaks. Some of them wonderful, and some of them not so wonderful. And he was a character that first appeared in a novel a long time ago, and I brought him back for this new one, Star Island. But I don't have I never have met anybody with a weed whacker attached to their arm. But I always thought that in his initial appearance in the novels, he was a bouncer at a punk club in Miami Beach, and I always thought that would be a great tool to have if you were a bouncer. You could really get everybody's attention if you fired up a big weed whacker and walked into the mosh pit. So that's where it came from. Absolutely,
I would agree. Now, one of your other characters, Skink, a former Florida governor, has some very interesting behaviors, comments, and yet in some of the scenes in your book, Star Island, he sometimes seems to be the sanest, most well-balanced person in the room.
He's one of my favorites. He pops in and out of a bunch of my novels, and I think he gets off a few lines that I may have used in a column on occasion, and he's on the edge of the law. Sometimes you're not sure which edge he's on, but he's just, he's a troubled soul, ex-governor of Florida. The job drove him crazy, and as it would, I think, most normal people. Anybody who's been to Tallahassee can appreciate the mental state that Skink is in right now.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, the other thing about Star Island that's very interesting is your view of the paparazzi. Mm-hmm. What kind of research did you have to do, or what kind of place did you put yourself in to develop such a well fleshed out character like Bang Abbott? Well,
I mean, I mainly had to immerse myself in the sort of the tabloid, reading the tabloids and watching these ridiculous TV shows, and acquainting myself with not just who was famous and why they were famous, and also you just watch the pack. All you need to do is watch TMZ, and you realize you're dealing with a certain level of bottom feeder that it has evolved with the celebrity culture. Years and years ago, there was only one major paparazzo that everybody knew, and that was Ron Galella, who spent his whole life harassing Jackie Onassis. And now, because of the proliferation of celebrities, many of whom don't really deserve much of our attention, but the industry has expanded, so you've got hundreds and hundreds of these guys, and they're mostly guys who are chasing after Sandra Bullock and Cameron Diaz, and doing very important work in the name of First Amendment. And so I was always interested in, novelists are always interested in loathsome characters. They're fun to write. They put them on the page, and the more detestable they are, the more fun you can have with them.
Right, definitely. Yeah. Now, you've also written several books for young readers. Yep. Mm-hmm. How do you approach writing for that audience that's significantly younger than your primary audience fan base?
Well, that's a good question. the sensibilities of the kids' novels are the same. They're funny. They're sort of smart alecky, and they're irreverent, and what all they really do. I mean, you're telling the story through the eyes of a young teen or a tween or whatever it is. So the situations aren't going to be the same as they are in a novel for grown-ups. Obviously, the language that's used isn't going to be the same, but you can still have a lot of fun and have the same themes and have the same sensibilities, especially about their love for Florida and the natural part of Florida. It really wasn't as big a transition as I thought it would be, and I could never imagine the response I would get to these. I mean, that was totally unexpected. But it's a great thing to hear from these kids, and they you know, I spent my whole life making fun of grown-ups, in both in the Miami Herald and in the novels I write. So it wasn't a big jump to do that through the eyes of a kid.
Right. That sounds wonderful. Now, who are some of your favorite authors and some of the books that maybe inspired you?
Well, I mean, I like lots and lots of different kind of writers. Unfortunately, I don't have much time to read because I'm always working on a book. But I mean, you go back to Kurt Vonnegut, Tom Wolfe, Tom McGuane. I was a big fan of John Steinbeck. I mean, there were just a number of them. Joe Heller, Catch-22, I think, was a book that had a tremendous impact on me when I was young. Just an amazing book. And you know, nowadays there's so many good writers. I mean, even here in Florida, you've got a lot of. I mean, Florida's attracted a lot lot of writers too because of the material. But I mean, even around here, you have Tim Dorsey, you have Randy White in Sanibel is a good friend of mine, and he's marching on in the tradition of John D. MacDonald, who I think influenced all of us. Right. I mean, I don't think you can be any kind of a writer in Florida and not have read and been influenced by John MacDonald.
Now, considering that we'll probably have some young people watching this podcast, do you have any advice for any aspiring writers or inspiring journalists or a young person who wants to have some kind of career as a writer?
Well, journalism is probably not what I would call a target-rich environment right now. Newspapers are scaling back dramatically, woefully. I mean, I think more than ever we need good journalists. It's tough to find a job. It's tough to find a paper that's hiring, and that's the fact. Novels, this is a tough time to try to get a first novel published. The same economic problems that have afflicted newspapers and television have also afflicted the book publishing business. So, but it doesn't mean that good writers don't get discovered and don't get well published. It happens. It happens every cycle of publishing. So, I mean, I tell people, keep writing. If you're just starting out, keep a journal every day. Write in the journal. Get used to the rhythm and flexing the muscle of writing, and do your best to sort of, stay with it. It's a discouraging thing. We all collected rejection slips when we got started. Everybody did. James Patterson did. The most successful novelists will tell you stories of manuscripts that were sent back, heartbreakingly, but they stuck with it and they got published. And that's the hardest thing. Persistence, just believing in yourself is the first step.
Great. Well, as we're wrapping up, I would just like to ask you, you're clearly very passionate about Florida and the natural world. Is there anything you would like to share about your feelings about Florida and Florida's natural environment?
Well, I mean, I think everybody had a wake-up call with the oil spill, the BP
definitely.
Oil spill, because this wasn't even off the coast of Florida. It was off the coast of Louisiana. And it impacted 4 different states with dramatic and in some cases catastrophic economic consequences for a lot of fishermen and a lot of people who rely on the tourist industry as well. So if nothing else, it demonstrates how fragile the environment is, how careful we have to be about it. And we had been told that this could never ever happen. And if it did happen, it could be contained quickly and it was nothing to worry about. And it was all a load of garbage. They didn't know what they were doing the first few weeks. It was a circus the first few weeks. They were inventing devices to drop on this pipeline. So it was clearly they weren't ready. They weren't prepared. And the Gulf of Mexico is too important and too precious to all of us to dump that many millions of gallons of oil in there. So, I mean, it's just an example of how careful we have to be and weigh the benefits of some of these projects and some of these giant escapades with what the cost and the risk is. And in this case, the risk is very high.
Absolutely. Well, we certainly thank you for drawing attention to those important issues, and I thank you for your time. It's been a pleasure, and we thank you for being here.
Sure.